the next item, item 10, and that's our submission that I've just referred to actually, that Christina Kaiser's been working on to government on the Urban Development Authority's discussion document. Members, I'd like to open by acknowledging Christina. Christina, you've done sterling work here. At the outset, I was a very willing participant in just going down the journey of supporting the establishment of UDAs, but the more I've got into this as a member of this reference group that we established, and that reference group is myself and Councillor Lee, Councillor Hulse, Councillor Philippina, and we had also expression of interest from local boards, and local board member from Rodney, Phelan Puri, also participated. The more we got into it, the more complex it was. So, Christina, you have drafted with your cross-departmental team a very comprehensive submission. I just want to acknowledge your extremely thorough work in that regard and invite you to present your submission.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'll just thank you, Councillor Darby, so through the chair.
Welcome Penny Purritt, I should mention.
And thank you, Penny, for being here as well. As you've just gotten a hint, this is a proposed response to the, excuse me, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment's Urban Development Authority's discussion document. The proposals set out in the discussion document outline frameworks and mechanisms to undertake large-scale urban development and support urban regeneration. The government is proposing through this legislation enablement for local and central government, so to be clear, it could be either who lead urban development, to empower nationally or locally significant urban development projects to access more enabling development powers and land use rules, and establish new urban development authorities to support those projects where required, and powers which may include the ability to acquire parcels of land, to plan and fund infrastructure, to buy, sell, or lease land and buildings, and to override existing and proposed district plans through the preparation of development plan, or ACT, as the regulatory authority by granting planning consents. The ministry is proposing that the developments could include housing, commercial premises, associated infrastructure, and amenities, including parks, community spaces, or shopping centers. They could be in greenfield areas and parts of city expansion. The background of this is that the proposed legislation is the government's response to recommendations made by the Productivity Commission through the Using Land for Housing inquiry. And the proposals are part of the government's ongoing program to inform the urban development system overall. So that includes the Resource Legislation Amendment Act and the Productivity Commission's Better Urban Planning Inquiry. The government is intending the proposed legislation to be a toolkit to meet the ongoing needs of urban development, and it's intended to also complement government's Housing Infrastructure Fund and the recent National Policy Statement on Urban Development Capacity. Submissions to the ministry are due on 19 May, and Cabinet will decide mid this year whether to proceed with a bill. So in terms of our response, what we are asking for is approval on the draft submission. This is, again, as the chair said, a council family response, so it was developed working with colleagues across Auckland Council, also with Auckland Transport, Panuku Development, Auckland, and Water Care. We've also worked with the IMSB Secretariat to get their input, and the political reference group has provided staff with direction on this draft. There are more than 169 proposals in the discussion document. So what we've tried to do is respond with detail to the most substantive proposals in terms of how we've done our submission. We are suggesting that the council should support in principle the establishment of urban development authorities insofar as they provide for local aspirations and align with current and future plans, and that they take a collaborative approach to urban regeneration. We have Panuku, and we support the work that it does together with Council. However, we have significant concerns regarding aspects of the overall proposals for the UDAs as drafted, and they include the composition and powers of the UDAs, the processes outlined for the development of a UDA, and the nature of new urban development that could arise if they're not sufficiently responsive to the current legislation, planning, environmental, and infrastructure context. So as proposed, we have some concerns about the tools, the processes, and interventions in the discussion document, really addressing the underlying constraints that presently hold urban development back. We also have some concerns that they're not well integrated with the government's wider package of reforms. And we recommend that the council does not support proposals that would allow strategic objectives of a UDA in a project area to override territorial authorities' strategic decision-making at the city and regional level. For Auckland, these proposals would conflict with the urban growth strategy contained in the Auckland Unitary Plan and the Auckland Plan. So, as set out, the proposals would create greater potential for out-of-sequence or ad hoc greenfield proposals to be brought forward. They are likely to reduce planning integration and override decisions made with communities and agreements with infrastructure providers. And we don't believe that they'll be as cost-effective and efficient as what may already be prioritized. We also have some concerns about how trunk infrastructure provision is being handled through the proposals. And we've recommended that infrastructure providers be part of the establishment project of the development project. We have also some concerns about funding and financing proposals. What they're proposing, we have the funding mechanisms already. There's a there's a proposal around territorial authority veto rights, and we strongly support this proposal. We think it's important to ensure that strategic objectives of the UDA are appropriate and don't undermine council's responsibilities. And we also recommend that council supports the urban focus of the UDAs. And finally, we suggest that council recommends that any powers over reserves have set parameters to ensure that any reserves that might be replaced are with equal or better quality open space. We've received some local board feedback. One piece is attached to the report, so that's from Puketapapa, and that's they don't agree with the proposed new legislation. They believe that there should be additional development powers, rather than those additional development powers, that they should focus on the Local Government Act and the Resource Management Act and what powers might be in there that can help support achieving better housing intensification. They also suggest that government should have a more purposeful agenda on affordable housing. I've also received some further feedback, some this morning, from Mangere, Otahuhu, Hawak Local Board, as well as the Oraki Local Board. There is some opposition to the proposed legislation, and there is support for ensuring that decisions that are made at the community level and some of our long-term decisions remain as they are. So those are the key points. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Questions for Christina on this topic, members?
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
You're happy to move? Thank you, Councillor Holst. Do I have a second? Thank you. Was that a
But
second?
no, I want to ask a question.
Okay, I'll second then, and Councillor Quack's question.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the extensive report. Just a couple of questions that I have. In paragraph 28, there seems to be an acknowledgement there of the difficulty around brownfields development, and it talks about incentives may be required to encourage brownfields development in order to compensate for additional complications. What incentives would we have in mind? Or what incentives could be put out there?
I think it would depend on the development at the time. So I don't know quite broadly if I could say specifically what the specific incentives would need to be.
Mrs. Perrott, do you have any views on that?
I think that the real gist of that particular paragraph was about the view that we believe urban development agencies should focus more on brownfields because that's where it is actually harder to get more housing up and running, where greenfields in themselves the existing development industry are very well adept at developing greenfields. And I think the comment there about incentives was that if the government was looking at legislative change to encourage UDAs, perhaps they need to put their attention to what kind of incentive might encourage greater redevelopment in our brownfields.
And we would support incentives? What kind of incentives would we support?
Well, I think that there could be a range of those incentives, but as Christina has said, it would depend on the different, what was the specifics of that particular UDA, because what is being proposed here is that for every area that might be developed by a UDA, there would be a different set of agreements between the Crown and the TA about what they could or could not do. But you know, there could be planning incentives, there could be funding incentives, but we've left that open for government to think about further going forward.
Okay, thank you. Just one other further question around the compulsory acquisitions. And I'm just somewhat concerned about the amount of power that we may be handing over to the Minister of Lands in regards to compulsory acquisitions.
The powers that they're proposing would not, well, there are some concerns, and that's what we've outlined. The main issue is that for each UDA, there would be different powers. So it's a little bit difficult to say exactly how that would look. So it's quite dependent, but we do have some concerns about that.
We give qualified support to that?
So I think what we've said in our submission is that the proposal only gives the UDA the same powers of compulsory acquisition that exist with existing TAs. So you can either take the view that that power is too wide, or you could, and in some camps there is a view that the existing compulsory acquisition powers that TAs have are not sufficient if you want to move forward with amalgamation of land with it at speed. We haven't commented on that. All we've said is that the current powers that they're offering a UDA are exactly the same as a TA has, and in the case of Panuku, we can delegate, as the governing body can delegate to Panuku those powers. So it's not really addressing the issue that has existed for a long time, that the powers under the PWA, the Public Works Act, are actually quite they take a lot of time, because usually you start with an offer first, and if then the party doesn't agree, then you have to go through a process which can go to court over compulsory acquisition. If the intent of this discussion document is to have legislation that speeds up the process of amalgamating land, what is proposed in the paper will not do that. And that's why we've just raised that we're not really quite clear on what the problem definition is that this paper is trying to address. Is it the problem of speedily getting development happening and houses on the ground in urban areas, or is it just raising a tool that will enable a different type of urban development but will actually take 2 or 3 years to see something happening on the ground? And we need some clarity in what is trying to be achieved there.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
No question.
No questions? Are there further questions here, members?
Good questions, brother.
Mr. Chair,
Councillor Hulse.
thank you. Can I just really want to acknowledge alongside you this excellent piece of work. You know, on the face of it, we are keen to make development happen, but the points that we've made within the submission outline very clearly some of the issues that have not been well thought through in the preparation of this. And, you know, to be absolutely blunt, I think it reflects yet another attempt by the government to have a bit of a quick and dirty process rather than have a look at what we've got at the moment, the tools that are available at the moment that actually need to be supported and deployed sensibly. The biggest risk we've got with this is that we're required to set up a UDA pretty much for every development that happens, which adds hugely to the cost, the time and the complexity of development in Auckland. So thank you to your leadership on this, and I think we've got a good submission.
Thank you, members. So it's moved and seconded, and just a quick few words. Councillor Hulse, you mentioned quick and dirty, but the Productivity Commission actually, you probably keep the dirty maybe, but the quick it's not really, because Productivity Commission came out with this recommendation in
2015.
15.
Yeah.
At best, it would be delivered by 19. So 4 years to deliver maybe more housing. That's the sort of challenge that we've got. And I think, you know, we've responded extremely well. This is, in some ways, primarily affects Auckland more than any other territorial authority. And whatever is ultimately delivered, we could possibly take best advantage of it. Though, as Christina and Penny have outlined, we do have those powers, a lot of those powers now, and maybe we could bestow those greater powers onto Panuku Development Auckland. But Christina and the team, and it includes Auckland Transport, Watercare, Panuku Development Auckland, have spent hundreds of hours responding at quite significant cost to this council, responding to a government discussion paper. And we should not underestimate what it costs to actually respond. It's several tens of thousands of dollars in the writing of this submission. I think there's a lot of potential in having an urban development authority in Auckland, not one, maybe more, and maybe that's the Hobsonville Land Company on behalf of government expanded, and maybe it's our own Panuku Development Auckland expanded with a greater remit and wider mandate. But I do have a lot of concerns about the erosion of public participation that is signalled in this discussion document. I don't think that's the direction communities want any governance group to go in at the moment. I think you've only got to look around the world and the revolt that's happening at the erosion of public participation. I think we should be strengthening it. It's something this council has been strengthening. I would be very disappointed if the government went down the track of weakening public participation. I'd be very disappointed if the government went down the track of marginalising territorial authorities like our own in making the decisions on whether a matter is publicly notified. That should sit with this territorial authority. So I support the recommendations here in having an urban focus and not a future urban focus for the reasons outlined by Penny Perrott and Christina. In some ways, I look at the roads of national significance direction, and I can see that this risks becoming a sort of a DOMS, developments of national significance direction, where there is a risk of railroading things through. And I think Christina's points overall have reinforced that that is not a good direction. I am encouraged to see increased Māori engagement, and I guess that's because of those in the Parliament who have been representing Māori, but I reinforce the dramatically reduced wider public participation that's signalled in this. So a lot of potential if we can get this right and if government can get it right, but we've got a long way to go, and hopefully government listens to the many points that we are confirming here today. So it's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Just before we
Sorry,
go on,
speaking to it, Councillor Cracks.
I do see a bit of a contradiction here, that on one hand we do support more public consultation, more public input, more local input, and on the other hand, however, we do seem to be supporting compulsory acquisition. There seems to be a bit of a contradiction there. Just an observation.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee.
Just briefly, look, Mr Chairman, I think the officers have done a very good job in difficult circumstances. Essentially, though, I think this council should take a position on principle and on logic and say we oppose the idea We already have the situation covered by and large with the Auckland Council family. It is meant to be a super city set up for critical mass purposes, and to set up another bureaucracy, regional bureaucracy, is just foolishness. I know which minister has pushed this, and I won't mention his name, but just think about it. I think that we need to follow the leadership of the Puki Tāpapa local board and just say no. It's crazy.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. To the contrary, no.
No.
And declare that carried. Thank you.